CNN and the prominent conservatives that aren't. Go, CNN. Prominent conservatives that aren't.
Go back and take a dispassionate look at what was presented in the court cases to see if, in fact, there was any credible evidence of fraud that could have changed the election result. And in going back to the 6 battleground states, there just is no evidence of systematic fraud. And you know, Anna, that ties right into Stephen Ayers, the witness in last Tuesday's January 6th hearing.
All right, folks, that's enough of the talking heads over there at CNN and the people that have thrown in with the talking heads at CNN and the mainstream media. Welcome to GAMcast for July 15th, 2022. It's a cloudy and sometimes sunny but incredibly humid day in Atlanta. I hope you're having good weather where you are. It's a slow news day, very slow news day, it being the summer, people being on vacation, and a Friday, you can imagine. But we've got a lot to talk about out there. This prominent report, which came out after our podcast yesterday, so we did not get a chance to cover it. Let me go ahead and debunk it real quickly. So first and foremost, the headline is from CNN, Prominent Conservatives issue report debunking Trump's 2020 election claims. Now, I'm now looking dead at the report. It's basically 72 pages of regurgitating what the mainstream media has said. The only thing that's new here, folks, is that a bunch of, and I'll admit, I believe they all are Republicans, right? I don't know how you would classify them, but they're Republicans. And so before I go ahead and debunk this in about 5 or 6 ways, which are pretty easily debunkable, let's start with why they're doing this. Why are they doing it? Well, this is something that is very effective. I wish it weren't, but it's very effective out there. So it's effective for a lot of ways. And we talk about this all the time, but the media environment is so corrupted, so left-leaning, so one-sided, right? That the left, let's just say hypothetically the left is 40%. Let's say the quote-unquote conservative, the libertarian, the constitutional, we're 40%, and there's 20% in the middle. Their 40 never listens to anybody else. They're emotional. You can't convince them that water is wet. That's it. If the media tells them water's dry, it's dry. That's the end of that story. So this isn't for them. Although they get a little bit of satisfaction going, yeah, I heard that even conservatives, so a little bit of that. But it doesn't really change their mind because they already got their mindset. Can't be changed, right? And then what this is designed to do is to go after independents, and it's designed to pick off a few Republicans, right? Or that Republican 40%, Republican, libertarian, conservative. Now, it doesn't pick us off because we're smart people. We're intelligent. But I want you to understand, even if you are smart and intelligent, if you haven't been paying attention and if you're not careful and you don't have a natural skepticism, and if you don't have a source like this one, you can fall into the trap. And I'll give you an example about people that I think are pretty wise but fall into the trap. So the other day, I don't do it much anymore, but I used to listen to the Dilbert Creators podcast with Scott Adams all the time. And now I no longer subscribe to it, and only if I just have nothing else to listen to or something's not downloading. But a couple times recently with respect to January 6th, I happened to catch him, and he wasn't doing too bad a job. So I started to give him another chance, and then there he goes back to Ukraine, and there he goes back to, I think the worst of the economy's over. Well, that's somebody who doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. There's no way the worst of the economy and the economic system is over. Everywhere you look, you continue to see the bad news, and you're going to continue to see it. And the reason he thinks that is he believes what he's told by the mainstream media. He can't help himself. He can't quite get there to understand that almost everything they do is either a lie or designed to deceive you. That's it. I mean, it really is the entire category. I said it, I think, a couple days ago and a couple times this week, that the best way to understand is the exact opposite, right? So to just use the opposite theory, right? So go back to this before cue out of this. Let's go back to this headline. Prominent conservatives issue report rebutting Trump election claims. What's the opposite of that, right? Non-prominent conservatives issue report confirming Trump election claims. That's the opposite. And that's what's more true here. And so the reason that it confirms Trump's claims is that if you look at, oh, come on, don't do that to me now. Stop that. Yeah, here we go. All right. If you go and you look at the report, which we're looking at it, right, it basically confirms what Trump says, which is there was fraud. There's lots of ample fraud in the election, and no one's bothered to look for it, right? So anyway, so it says the title of the report is Lost, Not Stolen, the conservative case that Trump lost and Biden won the 2020 election. Now, first debunk. these are supposedly prominent conservatives. That's not true. I want you to ask yourself as I read these names if you've ever heard of any of them, okay? Senator John Danforth, Benjamin Ginsburg, the Honorable Thomas B. Griffith, David Hope, the Honorable J. Michael Ludwig, the Honorable Michael W. McConnell, the Honorable Theodore Olson, Senator Gordon Smith. Now, I've heard of a lot of them, but only because I'm a junkie, and I've been following them for a long time. I never heard of Ludwig before in my entire life until the January 6th committee. He is not genuine, okay? But what you have here is you have a bunch of former Republican, admittedly Republican, judges here and senators, okay? But most of them are rhinos and most of them are establishment types, okay? And the other thing you have to understand is, I think Reagan said it best. He says the Republican Party is a big tent. That's always been true. The Republican Party has always been a lot more diverse than the Democrat Party, right? The Democrat Party had the communists, the socialists, and the New Dealers, and then back in the day, they used to have a few little, conservative, quote unquote, Democrats, which meant basically they were fiscally conservative, but they were more or less liberal on social issues. The Republican Party, I think that's 4 categories, has been whittled down to about 2 or 3 now. The Republican Party's always had about 10 or 15 different groups that you can go into, right? All kinds of different groups. And that's part of the problem you have when they try to get a presidential candidate. You'll notice, right, that Democrats have a much easier time getting their people to fall in line than the Republicans do. But I digress. Anyway, so they're not prominent conservatives. So that's the first problem you have. Let's get into the report a little bit and see what they're talking about. It says, we are political conservatives. Well, no, you're not. Who have spent most of our adult lives working to support the Constitution and the conservative principles upon which it is based. Limited government, liberty, equality of opportunity, freedom of religion, a strong national defense, and the rule of law. Now, I don't believe in a strong national defense, so I don't know what they're saying. This word conservative can be interpreted in many different ways. We have become deeply troubled by efforts to overturn or discredit the results of the 2020 election. That's not true. Each and every one of you has been very troubled from the very beginning. Okay? We therefore have undertaken an examination of every claim of fraud and misconduct put forward by President Trump and his advocates, and now put the results of those investigations before the American people, and especially before the fellow conservatives who may be uncertain about what and whom to believe. Okay, so let's hear. I've got the report, and if you're listening on the YouTubes or watching on the YouTubes and the Rumbles and the various BitChutes and whatnot, we're going to look through this report. Okay, it's about 72 pages, and about a mainstream media sites and a bunch of stuff and citations to court cases. Folks, it's funny. I see no ballots in here. I see no audits. I see no studies of anything. That's not true. All this is basically, and I've downloaded it because it's pretty good if you want to know where to find the cases and go look at the dockets. But they've got no new information here, right? Donald Trump and his supporters have failed to present evidence of fraud or inaccurate results significant enough to invalidate the results of the 2020 presidential election. That may be true. Right? We do not claim that election administration is perfect. Election fraud is a real thing. There are prosecutions in almost every election year. No doubt some election fraud goes undetected. Nor do we disparage attempts to reduce frauds. States should continue to do what they can to eliminate opportunities for election fraud and to punish when it occurs. But there is absolutely no evidence of fraud in the 2020 election on the magnitude necessary to shift the result in any state, let alone as a whole. But you said you looked at the evidence, and you haven't. So what this report basically does is it says, based on what we've discovered from not looking, there's no evidence of significant fraud that would have changed the election. Okay, fine. But why are you doing this now? We've known this pretty much right up until January. Everybody knew that, right? So they basically have just repackaged what we knew already, right, is that there's a lot of smoke and nobody's looked to see if there's fire. And so they're saying, well, there was smoke, nobody looked. And so since nobody has been able to look and prove it, then there's no fire. That's not the way this works. And one last thing here just to debunk it. I'm gonna go Control F here and search for 2,000 Mules. There are 3 references to 2,000 Mules. All right? So here's the first reference to 2,000 Mules. A second example is a recent film from Dinesh D'Souza, 2,000 Mules. And again, this is examples of fraud that aren't true, according to them, which attempts to demonstrate rampant voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election through digital device location tracking. Yet the film, heartily endorsed by Trump at its Mar-a-Lago premiere, has subsequently been thoroughly debunked in analyses. Okay, so that It cites the first references to 2,000 Mules in that paragraph. Let's go to the second one. That's the footnote, which basically tells you where you can go get the movie. That's not very helpful. And then the third reference is in the third footnote, which is, again, the proof that it's been debunked. Well, it's been debunked by a New York Times article, by the Dispatch, right, by NPR, by the Washington Post. I thought you said you guys did the work. It doesn't appear that you did. And I've read the New York Times article that they refer to, and they say that the problem is they don't show the film, and Dinesh D'Souza has already explained that. I show the film where I can, but even though all states that had drop boxes were supposed to have film, most of them didn't. So I can't give you what they don't have. And number two, it says people that said that the tracking data is not accurate are just wrong. It is, and they're using it to convict people on January 6th. So don't be alarmed nor fooled by what they're putting out there, folks. It's just another hoax. They come out, they get a bunch of conservatives, and they just repackage things. Now, why do they do this kind of thing? We're going to get to it a little bit later when we get to A0C. She's out there. The Democrats are just beside themselves on what they're going to do about Roe v. Wade. And again, the Constitution's no obstacle for these folks. So how did we get here? Well, I happened today to see on my Twitter feed a montage from our friends at Daily Wire. And I want you to take a listen, see if you recognize this prominent politician. And we're going to go back and revisit something, again, probably one of the original hoaxes that we got out there from the Democrat Party all those years ago. We're talking about going back to 2006. Now, this is not 2006, folks, because this politician, this prominent politician you're about to hear, is referencing none other than DJT. But I want you to take a listen. We'll come back and talk about it.
Trump has indicated that he plans to announce a 2024 run in the next month or so. What impact would that have on the midterms, and would it benefit Democrats, in your opinion?
Do I ever even mention his name? Would I even waste my time talking about him?
Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to our country.
What do the Russians have on Donald Trump? You should not have a Trump shutdown. The White House clearly.
Anyway, obviously, folks, that's Nancy Pelosi. And part of the reason that Nancy Pelosi acts like that so foolishly and, says, do I ever mention his name? And then, of course, it's easy enough to go, well, here's about 10,000 times when you've mentioned his name. And they're not even that long ago. The reason she acts that way, folks, is that the Democrats have very carefully cultivated a media environment, or a feedback loop, as I like to call it, where basically they create their own reality. So they say something, and then since they control all of the media, which is supposed to be the check and balance, nobody ever checks them. Nobody ever says that's false. Nobody reports anything. So they walk around and they've managed to get all of their voters and followers not even to question anything. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to prominent Democrats, and I'll say, "What about da?" And they'll go, "No, that's not right. That's not true. Send me a site." And then I'll send them a site, and it turns out to be true. They go, "Well, that's old news," or, "Well, it doesn't mean that person doesn't represent the Democrat Party." And what always bothers me, and I say this to my friends when I get back to them, I say, what bothers me is not that you didn't know. And what necessarily bothers me, you don't even want to accept it. What bothers me is that I've proven that you were uninformed on this, yet you're not open to go, wait a minute. If they're not being honest with you about A, what makes me think they're being honest about B, C, D, E, and whatnot. So let me get back to the grift of how it started. As I remember, I fell for this one a little bit too. Right, in 2006. In 2006, they decided to put Nancy Pelosi forward as the Speaker of the House and leader of the Democrats and all this party. She got that job because she was a woman. And even I was like, well, I guess it's about time we have a woman. I mean, I had no idea I was going to be in for this, right? I assume, well, basically we're going to demonstrate to everyone that women can do the job just as well as a man, that a woman has every right to do it as a man, and yada, all that crap. I was fine for that. I didn't realize that what we were going to do is like, if you get a woman, then she basically should do whatever she wants. Or if you get a black person, they can do whatever they want, and they can never be checked. And no one, that's not what I signed up for. Now, we didn't know it then, but we know it now. And we talk about it all the time. What are we doing to fix it? When we get to A0C in a few minutes, we'll see absolutely nothing. And I mean absolutely nothing. But anyway, all right, so some other latest news out there. Peter Navarro, as you know, I don't know if you know this or not, but contempt of Congress is something that largely hasn't been a thing. Now, there's been contempt citations almost since the beginning of the country, but they never really went anywhere. Congress would, kind of occasionally try to hold somebody in contempt and then get the DOJ to prosecute it. And usually the DOJ wouldn't mess with it. And this was even when the DOJ was of the same party. So it just never really went anywhere. It was always kind of a paper tiger. In the last 2 or 3 years or so, since the Democrats have taken over, especially since Biden has, now got the Democrats in charge of Congress and a Democrat in charge of the justice system, they have weaponized it. They went after Bill Barr. They have now gone after Bannon. They've gone after Navarro, and they're going to be going after some other folks too. And here's the new part I want you to understand. No, even if they went after people before, what they would do is they would rattle their saber and say, look, you really need to go over to Congress. All right. And then eventually the person would go, okay, man, they're serious about this. All right, I guess I better go over there and testify to Congress. So they'd work something out. It was always the way things went down. All right. And now what I want you to understand about telling this story is the truth. And the short version is now they're basically being petty and they're weaponizing it. So that if you are in contempt of Congress, if you later agree to testify, which would have been what would have happened back in the old days, either they would have ignored it or they would have pushed you to and cajoled you to say, look, you really need to go down there and give Congress what they want, and then we'll move on. We'll dismiss this thing, move on. Not anymore, folks. And what you're hearing from the media, I want you to be careful. Just understand where we are. What you're hearing from the media and these people treat it, right? I may cover this again on Monday because Bannon's trial starts on Monday. And so I may cover this again then. It'll be a better time. And I'll play some of the bits for the media. But the media acts like this is just ordinary course of business. And it's not. It's a sea change in the way we treat people, right? And, with Congress likely to switch in November, I don't know if this is a good idea. Now, of course, you have to understand, if it does switch and they start holding people in contempt, Biden's DOJ is going to ignore it like they did in the old times. But anyway, here's the headline from CNN. Former Trump White House trade advisor Peter Navarro rejects plea deal in contempt of Congress. All right. Former Trump White House trade advisor Peter Navarro rejected a plea deal from the Justice Department, prosecutors said on Friday. The deal would have allowed Navarro to plead guilty to one of 2 contempt of Congress charges for not cooperating with the House's ongoing January 6th investigation. Navarro would also be required to comply with the House Select Committee subpoena to the satisfaction of the Justice Department, prosecutors said, and would cap Navarro's potential jail sentence at 30 days. Now, he rejected the plea deal. We don't know all the particulars of it, but let me tell you what's going on here. A, the Democrats are weaponizing Congress's subpoena power. Congress doesn't really have subpoena power, but we've kind of, played footsie with it for hundreds of years. But what you've seen in just the last couple years is now all of a sudden it's getting weaponized. Number 2, all right, it pretty much, you'd ask for somebody, you knew they weren't going to come, they signaled they weren't going to come, you go through the dance, eventually says, all right, okay, I'll call Uncle, I'll come, and they go, okay, all right, not anymore. The Democrats, and again, it's them, it's not Republicans aren't doing this, it's the Democrats, right, messing up the system. Now they're going, no. You should have been there on the time you've been there. So now, best we can do is if you cooperate to our satisfaction, by the way, right, we're unilaterally going to determine, we'll agree to minimum 30 days. Think about that. Minimum 30 days for what harm? What harm has there been here? And the judge, I haven't broken it down, but I've been following it. I mean, the judge here acts like, oh, yeah, this is absolutely, this is like the worst thing I've ever seen. How dare you, not go to Congress? And one other thing, we talked about this yesterday and the day before as well, about here's another thing that, Democrats do. They've weaponized it. It's gotten so weaponized, I think the Supreme Court might well have just let this January 6th committee just sort of die of its own volition in November. Well, it would be January when the Republicans take over and disband it. But you know what? They start doing stuff like this. I think the Supreme Court may get involved and go, hey, whoa. These judges are saying it's not an unconstitutional committee. It is an unconstitutional committee, but we passed on it because we'll do whatever you want to do, political question doctrine and all that. You start putting people in jail because they inconvenienced you for 3 or 4 months to finally get you to testify? No. That's not the way any of this works, right? We talked about it with respect to abortion, right? I mean, if Democrats just would have kept it in the road and stayed with safe, legal, and rare, they probably never would have taken up a case to challenge Roe. But when you start getting to the point where, as we played I don't think I played it, but we played those women that were testifying before Congress, and they're talking about, well, I mean, if it's the day before, absolutely. If it's the day after, Let me think about that a minute. That's when people start getting upset. Anyway, the main thing you need to know is that the subpoena power of the Congress is getting weaponized, and these people who have given the January 6th committee a little bit of an inconvenience, they're going to try to get jail time. So anyway, we'll cover Bannon's trial coming forward on Monday next week. So some more news out there today is Joe Manchin apparently again has said, I'm not in on the Green New Deal. I'm not in on taxes. And so all of the left and, of course, the media, I repeat myself, and the Democrats are all in mourning, right? This is the most terrible thing in the world. I tweeted this morning, it's odd. Imagine how much trouble we'd be in if there weren't a Joe Manchin. I mean, literally. I mean, and this is the thing. They call him like a moderate, and they say Joe Manchin. Nothing moderate about Joe Manchin. He's all in on changing the voting rights. He's all in on codifying Roe v. He's all in on all of it. The only thing that makes Joe Manchin moderate is, A, he's not completely in on the New Deal, New Green Deal grift, right? He doesn't want to spend more money since we've already got huge inflation, right? And he doesn't want to end the filibuster. So I want you to understand on a Gutman scale of 1 to 100 with 80 being very liberal and above, and then you get the idea. I mean, he's about a 75, 76, 77. He's an extremely liberal person. He's just not willing to burn down the country. And to give you an example, I mean, again, he's saving us again. Thank God for Joe Manchin, all right? Because the new Green New Deal, we all know it's a hoax. And it's all just, again, why you would want to pour gasoline on a fire, I have no idea. But that's exactly what they want to do. Or think of it as a grease fire and they want to throw water at it, right? You're not supposed to put water on a grease fire. I don't have to tell you all. But anyway, so here's the story. They're supposed to be covering the Middle East. And listen to this mainstream media reporter, how he discusses the fact that Manchin this morning announced, hey, I'm out on this new Green Deal and no more taxes.
Now back home, there is a familiar domestic headache for the president again. Senator Joe Manchin, a fellow Democrat but frequent nemesis, announcing overnight that he can no longer support what was supposed to be an ambitious piece of legislation passed only by Democrats that would have finally passed the president's ambitious climate change agenda. You may remember that last year he single-handedly killed even more ambitious legislation that was going to have all sorts of other domestic...
Now, folks, given where we are right now with 85% of people thinking the country's in the wrong track, inflation, I mean, the Fed can't even get their hands around it. They're going to have to raise rates another 0.75%. I mean, why in the heck would you be talking about transformative, legislation like this? And you heard him. And if you're watching on the YouTubes of the Rumbles and in the various interwebs, you can see his face. I mean, he almost looks like he's going to cry because Manchin won't go along with it. And again, all Manchin is saying is going, hey, just pump the brakes, man. We just pumped $6 trillion into this thing. Let's figure out what's going on. What are you talking about, this transformative stuff? Nobody wants to transform America, especially with respect to green energy. But anyway, so that's all you need to know about Manchin. So we often talk about Roy Teixeira on the show. Those of you who've been listening from the very beginning, he's one of our favorite pollsters to go to. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. One, he's a Democrat pollster, and he is a rational Democrat. He is a classical liberal. I consider myself a classical liberal. It's going to surprise a lot of you, but believe me, one of these days when the political winds shift back to normality, you're going to see that I'm actually quite liberal on a lot of issues. But, I believe in the rule of law. I believe in rational discussion. I believe in logic. So you can't be anywhere where we are right now. The other reason we like to share is he's the architect. He was one of the persons that said, hey, you guys got a just excellent situation here because you appeal to minority coalitions, and minority coalitions are growing faster than the rate of the white population. Now, if you want to understand why Democrats have an open border, well, there's a lot of reasons. One, they're bringing the drugs up here and they benefit from the chaos in the drugs, and there's a lot of basically the Democrats have no policies, zero, zilch, nada. Not a single policy do they have that doesn't benefit their party. All right? There's no policy like the Republicans have where they go, well, I don't know who's going to come out on this, but it's a good policy, right? Like the harder you work, the more you get ahead. The Republicans go, I don't know who's necessarily going to come out on that one, but, that's the way it should be, right? And then they have some that favor them, not the Democrats. Everything they do. So when they heard, more minorities, we'll just open the border. And almost by definition, the people that are going to come, Canada ain't coming here. So the only people going to come are people of color, right? So anyway, long story short. So anyway, there are a lot of other reasons we like him, but he's a good read for that reason. So working class, here's his latest article, by the way, from yesterday. Working class and Hispanic voters are losing interest in the party of abortion, gun control, and the January 6 hearings. Democrats are betting on a small set of issues to mitigate their losses this November. Inflation may have hit a 40-year high of 9.1%, with competent recession risk, but Democrats believe that campaigning against the Supreme Court's overturning Roe v. Wade, arguing for more gun control in the wake of recent mass shootings, and highlighting Trump's anti-democratic malfeasance through the January 6 hearings can turn the tide in their favor. It is true that the polls recently have tightened a bit in the Democrats' favor, though this could be the eagerness of motivated Democrats to be polled. And there is general agreement that the Democrats' chances of holding the Senate are much better than their chances of holding the House. Recent data indicate that success for the abortion, gun control, January 6 strategy, to the extent it's working, and might well work in the future, is attributable to those voters whom the issues loom large and less likely to be influenced by current economic problems. Translation, if you're rich and you ain't got to worry about inflation, yeah, you're going to be more concerned about Democrat issues. Such voters are disproportionately likely to be college-educated whites, and it is here that Democrats have been demonstrating unusual strength. Now, folks, we've already talked about this, so I'm going to get to some important points, trust me. But we've already talked about the idea that they're doing very, very well with white elites, okay? All right, college-educated whites. For the first time, they're starting to win those people, whereas before they were losing them, at least less than the older white population, but they were at least holding them. Now they're losing among minorities, okay? But here's why I wanted to bring up this TheShare article, because it's actually more interesting. The crosstabs provided by Echelon allow for a comparison of strong progressives' basic political views with those of Hispanic and working-class voters. Here are some examples. This is what I wanted to take away and give you today, because we've already covered the idea that the Republicans are increasingly becoming the party of working-class voters. Now, folks, for those of us who've been following politics as long as I have, about 45 years, that, I think I compared it the other day to when the Republicans took Congress. That was a sea change. I remember where I was when Newt Gingrich took Congress. I mean, that was unbelievable. My entire lifetime, I mean, seriously, until 1994, I was born in 68, so from 68 to 94, that's quite a bit of my life. There had been nothing but a Democrat House. That's it. The Republicans occasionally sneaked in there and had the Senate for a few years, but that wasn't very often, right? And we're seeing that again. I've already covered that this week. But here's what I want you to understand that motivates these people, okay? So I want you to understand what motivates the political progressives that are now voting for the issues of abortion, gun control, and January 6, okay? Here's some of the takeaways. America is not the greatest country in the world versus America is the greatest country in the world, okay? By 66 to 28%, strong progressives say America is not the greatest country in the world. Think about that, folks. So if you got it, you're driving down your street, whatever, like I do, and there's a Stacey Abrams sign or a Raphael Warnock sign, or if you're out there in Arizona, it's a Mark Kelly sign or whatever, okay? People that support Democrats, right? Especially if it's a white person, all right? By 66 to 28, they don't think America is the greatest country in the world. Think about that. Now, by 70 to 23 and by 69 to 23, Hispanics and working class voters feel exactly the opposite. Hispanics and working class say, oh, no. 70 to 69% say, absolutely, America's the greatest country in the world. How about this one? Racism is built into our society, including into its politics and institutions, versus racism comes from individuals who hold racist views, not from society and institutions. Strong progressives are very, very sure of America's systemic racism, endorsing the first statement by an amazing 94-6, folks. 94-6. I did not misspeak. They think that racism is built into our society, all right? Now, this is almost as heartbreaking to me, but whatever. But Hispanics disagree, endorsing the second statement that racism comes from individuals, 58 to 36, as do working class voters by 57 to 33. Folks, it is only because of the incessant drumbeat of the mainstream media and the corrupt media complex that it's as low as that. 10 years ago, pre-Barack Obama, it would have been 90 plus to 10 that it comes from individuals. All right? How about this one? The government should deal with illegal immigration by making it easier to immigrate to the U.S. versus the government should deal with illegal immigration by increasing border security and enforcement. Strong progressives have no doubt about this one, favoring easier immigration 97 to 10. 97 to 10. Hispanics, however, split down the middle 44 to 47, working class 58 to 32. Shouldn't surprise you. Folks, if you want to go check out Teixeira, I don't have time to do more of it on my own, so you're just going to have to go check it out yourself. You go to theliberalpatriot.substack.com, theliberalpatriot.substack.com, and tell them the Great American Mail sent you. Anyway, all right, so another story out there that broke recently is somebody did a study, I can't recall who, I think it first came out in the Wall Street Journal, but U.S. President Biden's top 62% officials for keeping economy on track have no business experience. You heard that right. 62%. Now, what few do have business experience, folks, all right, are people like Pete Buttigieg and what like that, who, you know, he was a consultant, so it kind of counts, but it kind of doesn't. But I want you to understand that. And we talk about this all the time. There was a time when people on the left, they wanted to do the same things they want to do now, right? But they knew that they had to get the potholes done. They knew they had to get the kids educated, right? They knew they had to have the train running on time. What you have now is, because of this feedback loop, or whatever you want to call it, this media system where they get to create their own reality and they're never held responsible, now they no longer feel the need to bother with that. That's why you go get somebody like Janet Yellen, who's never had a day job in her life, right? That's why you see these people that are theoreticians, right? And so the problem with it is they're incompetent. Even if they wanted to stop inflation, for example, they have no ability to do it. They wouldn't know how to do it. Anyway, so I just thought that was an important story to make sure you were aware of what's going on out there. Not too much to say about that. I want to spend the remainder of the show, and we're not going to beat the clock here pretty much, but that's good. And this is about the Democrats' effort to, quote, quote, codify Roe or overrule Dobbs or what have you. So, folks, we talked about this yesterday, and I'm probably going to do, if you're still listening to the podcast, and a lot of you are, that's fine, no problem. It's easy enough to drop the podcast. But we're doing more things on the YouTube channel just because we can do this show, and then we do single issue topics. And so some of those single issue topics you don't get access to if you're listening to, because we're just not dropping them as podcasts. Anyway, and so yesterday we did something that we're probably going to do as a single issue podcast, but not all of them. A lot of them sometimes are different and new. But anyway, one of the problems that you have out there, and we talked about it yesterday with respect to Gavin Newsom. So they've proposed this completely unconstitutional banana republic idea that you ought to be able to sue the manufacturer of a lawful product that's being used unlawfully, right? They want to make it, right now they're starting with the guns, but next thing you know, you're going to be able to sue somebody because you get run over by a car. I'm like, well, was the car defective? No, the car wasn't defective at all. But somebody used it to run me over, so I'm going to sue you, right? This is idiocy. You know it's idiocy. But they do it, and then when the courts come along and go, no, you can't do that. I mean, are you kidding me? This is not a thing. Like, this is insanity. Oh, my God, the rogue court is out of control. Look at this. Look how the rogue court is doing these things. I mean, we got to rail this branch of government in, right? And so I gave you the example of that's what the whole gun idea is about. And I also gave you the example, if you listened yesterday, that in 2005, when they passed the law that they claim, quote unquote, gives them some sort of minor protection, which it doesn't. It's not true. But anyway, that's part of the thing that they've created. Well, they're doing the same thing now with respect to Roe v. Wade. All right. And so basically, we talked about this and we've gone over it. There's no constitutional right to privacy in the Constitution. Since there's not a right to privacy in the Constitution, that means that it can be regulated pursuant to the police power, state by state by state by state. Well, the Democrats don't like that. So they've decided they've got a couple of tacks for going after it. Now, the first thing that they have for going after it is they're talking about codifying Roe. I think Nancy says they're supposed to vote on it today. If they don't vote on it today, they'll vote on it next week. Anyway, it'll probably pass the House. I doubt it gets past the filibuster in the Senate, so it's probably about as dead as fried chicken, but that's fine. Anyway, the point is, under what constitutional authority can they codify Roe? Where in the Constitution do they have the authority to regulate that? They don't have it, of course. So if it were to get through and if it were to get signed into law, and I want you to understand, folks, but for the filibuster, it would pass the Senate. If it was just up and down vote, it would pass the Senate. And if it passed the Senate, and then Biden would sign it. Now think about that. No congressional authority at all. You'll remember when they were passing Obamacare and some reporter innocently asked Nancy Pelosi, like, under what authority in the Constitution you have to do? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I mean, she doesn't, these people have no idea what the Constitution is. But anyway, so I just want to make sure we understand they're talking about codifying Roe. It's just like everything else they do. It's just pie in the sky. Again, you understand, let's be clear, we'll have to agree. Democrats believe this. If we control the legislature, whatever, if we get 50.1% of the vote, we can do whatever we want. There's no limitation whatsoever of any kind, right? That's all it is. Majority rules. Now, we all know that's not the way it works under the constitutional system of government. Well, AOC and a bunch of the other imbeciles out there have come up with a new one. So I want to make sure you're aware of it. And again, as we do here, we're going to bring the Constitution to you, all right? And we're going to walk through this because you have to have a little bit of knowledge. You have to have a little bit of training to catch this one. All right. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I had to actually go back and look at the Constitution myself. I mean, intuitively, from my experience and my training, I knew that it was poppycock. But I wasn't exactly sure. So I said, let me go back and read that because it can't say that. And of course it doesn't. Anyway, so here's the tweet from A0C. With our basic rights under threat from a rogue Supreme Court. No, it's not. You can't. By the way, this is the moron who says, that they're an independent branch of government, and yet she's attacking another independent branch of government. Well, how independent are you if I call you rogue and they get to bring you to heel? Anyway, Congress needs to exercise our legal authority to the fullest extent. That's why we called on Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi to support stripping the Supreme Court's jurisdiction over abortion. Now, folks, I can tell you right now, I knew this. I caught this one. This is the second part I didn't catch it. Well, at least I knew it was wrong, but I wasn't sure exactly why. I had to go back and look at the document. First and foremost, you can't strip them jurisdiction over abortion. They have jurisdiction over abortion, right? It's Marbury versus Madison, 1803, right? They have the power to say what the Constitution says. That's it. They're the final arbiter of that. No one's disagreed with that until A0C. All right, but here's the part where it gets kind of hairy, okay? Anyway, it says here, the solution is to prevent the Supreme Court from reviewing the constitutionality or legality of the WHPA, which I assume would be something to do with abortion, which can be done in the next version of the WPH that we passed this term. Congressional authority to limit the court's jurisdiction is clear, is it now? Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution establishes that the Supreme Court shall have, quote, appellate jurisdiction, both as to law and fact, with exceptions and under such regulations as Congress shall make. So she's saying that she can take away their appellate jurisdiction. Well, folks, on the Great American Mail, we go back to the document. So we're going to have to take a look at that. You are now looking, if you're watching us on the YouTubes, looking at Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution. Let's read it. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under the Constitution, the laws of the United States, the treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority, to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of another state, between citizens of different states, so-called diversity jurisdiction, folks, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states, citizens, and subjects. Okay. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls. Well, let me just stop before I get there. That was the first paragraph. Nothing in there says anything about appellate jurisdiction. It says they shall have the power, their judicial power shall extend to all cases. All right, now here's the second paragraph, okay? In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, and those in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction, period. In all other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as Congress shall make. Now, that's the section she just referenced, right? In all other cases before mentioned, that would be the paragraph before, folks, right? Where I read all that stuff, the first paragraph, right? The Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as Congress shall make. So let me tell you what that means, folks, to anybody who understands the English language, which I do. The court has original jurisdiction. You don't pass go, you're right to Supreme Court. for cases involving public ministers, consuls, ambassadors, and those in which a state shall be a party. In all others, you have to appeal to them. Okay? So what they're saying is if you want to make an exception and give them original jurisdiction, Godspeed. But that's it. So she's completely full of it, as per usual. Anyway, you're now all caught up to date with all the news of the day. And if you enjoyed this live stream, I hope you tune back in tomorrow.